The golden word in the Pokemon card investing world, hey? This is the one that is sure to rub everyone up either the right way or the wrong way, and that is reprints. It sounds like we're about to get some reprints for Scarlet and Violet sets. In case you haven't heard and you've been living under a rock, it looks like we're getting Paldea Evolved, Obsidian Flames, Twilight Masquerade, Surging Sparks, Booster Box reprints, as well as Paldean Fates Booster Bundle reprints, and of course the continual rollout of Prismatic Evolutions product for the rest of 2025. So it looks like we are getting some reprints. Now the big question is, what impact will that have? How can we tell how much is already being printed? What does it mean from an investing standpoint? What does it mean for us people that are, aiming to pick up some product and hopefully make some money off it in the future? Before we get into reprints, I just want to touch on one concern that I have, and that's this almost skepticism around the Pokemon Company International and this idea that they're withholding product, like they're intentionally not printing as much, like it's some sort of conspiracy, and then getting people hyped to only print more later as it's a better business model. I just don't think that's the case. In fact, it almost sounds like tin foil sort of stuff, doesn't it? From me, and if you look at the numbers, 2024 had more cards printed than 2023. 2023 had more cards printed than 2022. If you have massive demand in probably the biggest bull market we've ever seen in the Pokemon card world, why on earth would you slow down production? Why on earth would you hold back product from consumers? Why on earth would you not take consumers' money because it means more profit for your company? It just makes no sense. And to capitalize on that point and tell you what I mean from my industry standpoint, of course, in case you're new to the channel and you haven't seen before, I also have a 9-to-5 which is working for a Toyota dealership. Now, 3 years ago, during, I suppose, the supply chain issues that we had during COVID, Toyota RAV4 hybrids, amongst other models, but let's just pick on Toyota RAV4 hybrid, everyone sort of knows that car, had massive supply issues. We had people waiting for up to 2 years to get into a Toyota RAV4 hybrid. They wanted to give us their money. They wanted to drive away in a brand new Toyota RAV4 hybrid. We just couldn't get them enough. We just couldn't build enough. It wasn't some conspiracy about us slowing down production and not building them. It was just simply supply and demand. And that's what we're seeing in the Pokemon card world at the moment. We wanted to give these people RAV4s because, Toyota Australia, of course, wanted to sell as many as they possibly can because there's more margin for them. It just makes no sense, this conspiracy theory about this progressive rollout and holdback of printing of Pokemon cards. In my opinion, the printers are on full steam. It's just we cannot get enough of them. And I get some of the arguments against or for why that might be happening, like, no one can get products being absolutely pumped to the moon. People's allocations for, brick and mortar stores and online stores are being cut back in half in some cases. And look, I think that's just because there's more competition. There's more online stores than ever trying to sell Pokemon cards. Brick and mortars are selling Pokemon cards. There's even, rip and shippers online now that are getting access to distributors to sell Pokemon cards. And there's more people in the hobby than ever at the moment. It is so popular. And I don't need to go into all the reasons. Pokemon Pocket's just one reason, but there's more people in the physical card game than ever wanting to collect these cards. I think it's just a conspiracy theory to think that they slow down the printing. It just makes no sense whatsoever. It's just more competitive than ever, the landscape. There's so many people wanting these products, it makes it feel like it's difficult to get. Why? Because there's more demand than supply. It's as simple as that. Now, onto the supply, that's where reprints come into play. Because essentially what a reprint does and is it's a reintroduction of more supply onto the market. And I want to talk to you about reprints and how we can possibly know how much something's been printed. That's the hard part. It is so hard to know how much something has been printed. Like, it's almost impossible. They don't release the numbers. They release total number of cards printed. Does this include code cards? Is it all energy cards? Is it, multiple languages? How much is in English? How many chase cards get produced? It's just so hard to know. Those numbers don't get told to us. One way to look at it, in my opinion, is looking at PSA populations. I think this gives you a little bit of an indication into how much of a set has been printed. And I get the counter argument to that point as not being accurate, because it's not accurate, but maybe it gives us a bit of an indication. The counter argument as to why it's not accurate is because if a set has more chase cards inside it, then of course they're going to get graded more. Therefore, it's going to bump up the PSA population of that set. Whereas if a set has a low number of chase cards inside it, then there's probably going to be a low number graded, because why on earth would you grade a card if there's no benefit to it? I always pick on Weedle here, but why would you grade a common Weedle out of Vivid Voltage for argument's sake? There's no point. Even if it comes back a 10, what, you know, you've wasted $20 to send it off to PSA and all that time in the mail without the card is just a waste of everyone's time, essentially, including your own. So people are only sending away cards that have some sort of value to them. So maybe if a set has a huge depth of hits, we're probably going to see a higher PSA population on those sets. So that's the counter argument as to why looking at PSA populations might not be accurate. Before we jump into some PSA populations, I just wanted to give a shout out to today's video sponsor, which is of course the Collector app. If you don't have this app, I'll leave a link in the description to download it. And if you do have it, please update it. There's a new update that's come out where you can now unstack your singles. People have been talking about this for a while. It's a really cool feature. The other thing about this app is you can add in your whole singles collection and your whole sealed collection. You can go for master set tracking. If you're an investor like myself, you can see the total value of each product that you've got inside there, both sealed and singles. You can see the total value of your whole collection. You can see daily gains, percentage gains, monetary gains, and hopefully no losses. And it's just a great app to store all your products in. So there'll be a link in the description for the Collector app. Now, back onto PSA populations. Let's jump into, and this is my point, and this is why I think PSA populations can give us a little bit of an indication. I'm just going to bring up one on the screen here, which is Team Up. Team Up has a massive amount of hits inside the set. Yes, there's some big ones in the Latios and Latios, and the Gengar, Mimikyu, etc. But there's a lot of cards inside there that people would want to grade. It's got a fair bit of depth inside it. It's a very, very strong Pokemon card set. So you would think, because of that amount of depth and the amount of cards that people would want to send away to get graded, there'd be a big PSA population. But there's not. There's only 45,000 PSA graded cards from Team Up. And you go, well, why is that? And that's because it was low printed. It barely got printed. Now, in comparison to that, a set like XY Evolutions, which arguably doesn't have as strong a chase cards as Team Up, if we look at the PSA population from XY Evolutions, there's 361,000 PSA graded cards from XY Evolutions. What does that tell us? That set was printed so much more than what Team Up was printed. So let's jump into these cards or these sets that we are getting expected reprints for from Scarlet and Violet. Starting off with the first one, which is Paldea Evolved. Paldea Evolved has 86,000 PSA graded cards. Now you can't tell me that Scarlet and Violet illustration rares haven't been getting a massive influx of people wanting to send them away to get graded lately. There's real grading plays in that because the print quality, particularly for sets like Base, Paldea Evolved, Obsidian Flames, is really, really poor. Like, it's a really low print quality and it's difficult to grade these cards in a PSA 10. So as a result, people are sending off massive amounts of illustration rares and special illustration rares in the hope that they grade a 10 and get a really good multiplier effect on the money that they've spent on those cards. So 86,000 for a set that's pushing 2 years old isn't actually all that many. And to make my point on that, if I look at a set like Astral Radiance, which got a minuscule reprint in the grand scheme of things from Sword and Shield era, that's got 79,000 PSA graded cards. So Paldea Evolved, I don't know how much of an impact, and I'll get onto that topic at the end of these numbers, you know, what sort of impact this will have. I don't know what sort of impact this reprint will have on Paldea Evolved. 86,000 PSA 10 cards, PSA total population cards already. Obsidian Flames, 106,000. The Zards are in there that people just send off to get graded like crazy. And of course, there's big plays on illustration rares in Obsidian Flames, which is, you know, pushing people to send a lot of these away. So 106,000 is a decent number. To put that into some sort of context for you, Lost Origin from Sword and Shield era has 125,000 PSA graded copies. So it looks like maybe Obsidian Flames is going to overtake Lost Origin for PSA, like total PSA population. And this leads on to the fact that, you know, these sets aren't short printed. Like, people are thinking, oh, you know, we just can't get stock. It's nowhere. You know, they're just not printing enough. They're printing enough. It's just getting spread thinner. That's the point I was trying to make at the start of the video. They are getting printed enough. It's just getting spread really, really thin because there's more people than ever in this hobby at the moment. Twilight Masquerade, another one. 72,000 PSA total population cards at the moment. That's a fair few. That is getting right up there already. Paldean Fates, 94,000 already. And finally, Surging Sparks, which has only been out for, what, 3-4 months? 84,000 PSA copies already. 84,000. These aren't, and I'll repeat, these aren't short printed sets. And yes, you know, lots of people are sending away illustration rares, and, you know, Paldean Fates has the Shiny Vault, which of course people will be sending away those to get graded. But these they're not short printed sets. Now, this is the big question. The big question is, what impact will, depending on the size of these reprints, what impact will they have on the price of booster boxes? And I suppose the big answer straight up is, no one really knows. You'd only be guessing, but we're also allowed to guess. We're allowed to have an educated guess around what sort of impact these will have. Now, Paldea Evolved, if it has a small reprint, for argument's sake, of booster boxes, I really don't think it's going to drop below, you know, $200. Maybe it gets down to $180. Maybe it gets down to $170. I don't think it's going to have much of an impact. And the other thing that people start doing is they start gaining a little bit of confidence then, because they go, Paldea Evolved had a big initial launch, of course. Then it had a small reprint, you know, 3 months ago, 4 months ago, whenever it was, back in October, November last year. And now it's getting another one. Surely that's done. And that's the confidence that people start to think about. They go, well, surely it's done by then. It is 2 years old. Rotation comes around this April. Come next April, Paldea Evolved should move out of rotation. So people go, well, hold on, is this its last hurrah before its final 12 months and then it moves out of rotation? Obsidian Flames in the same boat. Now, having said that, some people, and not so much myself, but some people have touted Obsidian Flames as Darkness Ablaze 2.0. And if this gets a really, really strong reprint, like a big one, I'm not saying it is going to be like Darkness Ablaze 2.0 because it's a much, much better set. The illustration rares artwork is really, people are really starting to respect the artwork in Obsidian Flames. And of course, we got those special illustration rare, that big Charizard hit inside there, which is stronger than the Charizard VMAX from Darkness Ablaze. But what it could mean is it sort of squashes the Obsidian Flames booster box price for a little while if it gets a big reprint. What else do we have coming? Twilight Masquerade. Now look, this is a strong set. And my advice to people, if it does drop down to a place where, you know, it's below where you initially bought in. So I don't know exactly where Twilight Masquerade's sitting as a box price at the moment. Let's say it's sitting around $220. And say it drops it to $150. And you bought in at $170 because you thought that was a good time to buy and you thought that was a fair and reasonable price. There's no harm in dropping back to $150. If you double down, that means your average buying price is going to be around $160. These boxes should rebound relatively quickly based on the amount of demand that we have for Pokemon cards at the moment. Everyone knows that if you go into your local Target, your local Kmart here in Australia, EB Games, and I'm sure everyone in the United States is similar, Canada's similar, Europe's similar, New Zealand's similar, United Kingdom's similar, stores just don't have packets of Pokemon cards for people to open. This additional supply going into the market, I don't think it's going to have the impact that people think it's going to have. The demand at the moment is just absolutely insane. And I think the Pokemon Company International has learnt from their mistakes of, you know, overprinting sets like, you know, Battle Styles and Shining Fates and Vivid Voltage during the pandemic when they were sort of figuring out how this, you know, new supply-demand discrepancy is really going to play or come into play. And finally, of course, you know, Paldean Fates and Surging Sparks booster boxes. I think the demand for these sets, particularly Paldean Fates with that Bubble Mew and Surging Sparks with just an array of hits inside there, isn't going to have too much of an impact. And Surging Sparks sitting at 84,000 PSA graded cards already, that's massive. But just keep in mind, a very, very strong set from Sword and Shield, of course the strongest, Evolving Skies, has 217,000 PSA graded cards. It seems like probably Surging Sparks is going to eclipse that on the run rate that it's on at the moment. But it just goes to show, even if a set has huge amounts of PSA graded cards, if the demand's there, which the demand is in the hobby at the moment, sets can still skyrocket and rebound incredibly quickly. We saw it in 2020 after the reprint of sets like Unified Minds and Unbroken Bonds. We saw it, more recently with sets like Silver Tempest and Lost Origin getting reprints, into Scarlet and Violet era and rebounding incredibly quickly. I just think unless these are astronomically sized reprints, it's not going to have the impact on the market that I think or people are thinking it's going to have. That's sort of my opinion around it. Now, if it does happen to have massive, massive reprints like Obsidian Flames, we could well see products sitting there for a while. It could well do something similar to Darkness Ablaze, where it sits and sits and sits, and finally, after being out for 4 or 5 years, really starts to make that uptick because it's becoming a collectible in its own right. And now, you notice I didn't even touch on singles. This wasn't a video about singles. We all know, generally speaking, what's going to happen to singles. They're just crazy at the moment. I don't even want to touch on them in this video. This was solely about sealed and reprints. I'm Michael. This is Pokeoz. Catch everyone next time.